Solar and wind lost the lifeline that we called ITC, but one technology came out stronger. We all know what that was, right? Batteries. Once seen as the sidekick or the backup is now the backbone of our renewable world, as it were. It's the centerpiece of reliability, resilience, and revenue. They're not just about renewables anymore. Batteries are keeping the lights on no matter what is fueling the grid. Chris, we're here at the PowerUp Live stage presented by Wärtsilä. Thank you, Josh, for hosting. Thank you for supporting as well. I really appreciate the opportunity to have a conversation with you about the ways that you've seen batteries grow into an asset class rather than a backup class. So I want to kick off with, you've said that batteries aren't renewables and they all too often get sort of couched as renewables. They're enablers. What does that mean?
Well, it's easy for us to class it as an accoutrement to renewables, especially when you talk about intermittency with solar and wind and things of that nature. But, the cold light of day is they're not generating anything. They're absorbing energy when we don't need it, deploying it when we absolutely do need it. And, that's an optimization play in any infrastructure, capacity.
Right.
Oil and gas, traditional fossil fuels, certainly the renewable side, but it's necessary, irregardless of the technology it's supporting.
Where do you see storage being deployed right now without renewables attached? Is that becoming more common?
It really is, and it has been for the last couple of years.
Okay.
We have plenty of spinning reserve and things of that nature and traditional fossil fuels. Renewables has definitely helped bolster the need to show that the diversification of technologies with the right optimization tools such as BESS could really be a long-term solution for a very mature infrastructure, which is exactly what the U.S. needs and requires for the next 10, 20, 30 years. But you can plug it into any power environment and really see a positive outcome, a more efficient usage of the power that's being generated.
Yeah. Chris, I alluded at the beginning that you all have made this strategic decision to be an EPC focused exclusively on batteries. Can you talk about that decision? I mean, you've been in project development for a long time. You've done a lot of solar projects. Why batteries only now?
Well, it's kind of a loaded point to say batteries only or battery exclusive.
Okay.
We still do quite a bit of solar.
Okay.
There's still a lot of clients in our client pool that are, renewable IPPs that are looking to solve for that intermittency. But we try to steer away from solar only projects to add that call it accountability and partnership attitude and bringing the value proposition of in-house investment around battery storage.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is our forward spend on subject matter experts that as an EPC help us design, plan, execute, certainly integrate software as well as hardware for a seamless deployment of this type of project.
So let's talk about the kinds of projects that are either renewable attached or standalone batteries. Are there any markets that you find standalone battery or even off-grid growing in frequency?
Yeah, where the economics make sense for a pure arbitrage play, buy it when it's low, sell it when it's high, such as the ERCOT market. We still do quite a bit of business there.
Yeah.
We'd like to see that level of deployment again. The economics of an arbitrage play extend into other ISOs, certainly.
Sure.
But right now, we're all cutting our teeth and learning how to maximize the dollars these things can create in one location like ERCOT, which is, it's got its ups and its downs.
So you've built all across the United States. What have you learned building an ERCOT that you feel is applicable as you is there a model that you've learned in building in Texas that you can take to other markets?
Can we sum it up as patience?
Patience.
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
ERCOT obviously operates uniquely compared to other ISOs.
In what ways?
They're certainly on their own brand in terms of identifying how they want to see these assets operate. They're not as independent from the owner operators, right? There's a lot of interconnection process flow. They're very stringent with that. Not very forthcoming maybe on some of the upfront information, but that's fine. That's why you hire an EPC as invasive as TruGrid to get in there, work with them, and not just learn their process flow to streamline the project deployment, but bring some level of value and challenge in terms of what they're trying to accomplish.
When I was starting in get into larger scale C&I and utility, I was working for a roofing company out in California that had done a lot of coatings and a lot of roofing for Chevron and Amoco. And it was really interesting, the juxtaposition, because the safety, like the OSHA requirements, it was kind of like the solar industry thought it was complex, right? And then you kind of look at what these roofers had to go through to go work on an Amoco facility or a Chevron facility. I think about that when I look at how our industry is approaching trying to go after, so to speak, the data center sector, which requires 5 nines of reliability. What are your thoughts on the data center market as a target for you as an EPC?
I think it's very rich, to be quite frank, especially in this seasonality of call it administrative hurdles, getting renewables as well as even batteries in some cases deployed on the larger level. It is so unreal the amount of power that is expected to be needed in the U.S. over the course of the next 10 years. Data centers, hyperscale are certainly driving that. Crypto mines, plenty of other things, not the least of which is just your general 3% increase as a culture as we build our country.
You still seeing a lot of crypto mines?
Not as many. We'll see what happens. They got that first ETF. It'll start rolling out, I'm sure. But we're in a position where we can help deploy near term a lot of these data center projects that are modular in nature.
Right.
You can sectionize these things and build out what you need for power as you continue to build out sections of the data center.
Right.
And, deploy solar and or battery in a matter of months, maybe a year and a half, where you might be in a little bit of a constraint as far as time with a gas facility, for instance. And again, it might be a good use case for the U.S. in general to see that, hey, it's going to take a diversification of generating assets to run any one central load. Data centers kind of like that small little project to prove that out.
Sure. I look at data centers as their own power plant. All the data center, it reminds me, Chris, back in the day when, Westinghouse and all of the industrialists were building factories, right? They became de facto utilities. I think we're entering into a phase where the big tech FANG are themselves going to forward integrate into the power sector, because they're just going to be building so many assets and with the digital controls already available, they're going to be competing with the same utilities that were once the gatekeepers to the grid.
You got to own your own destiny to be successful. And this is certainly history repeating itself in the industrial mindset.
I'm glad you used that phrase, because history repeats itself in our industry right now, in that we are facing an ITC cliff, but it's not the first time. ARRA, the 1603 tariffs. How do you think the lessons from the many other travails we've been through apply today, given what we're facing with HR1?
Having been in this space, such as you, for a couple of decades now, you just kind of get used to it, right? You know that the needs far outweigh any expectations of any administration and how they perceive where money needs to go for infrastructure that they are on the hook for providing. So, we're going to survive. ITCs will likely come back to the same degree, who knows? But, to the other side of the token, a free, open capital market sounds pretty nice too. Sounds stable to me.
Yeah, and also, Jigger said recently, like you can't build a business based on a single policy initiative, a single element of risk, as it were. And the cool news is that batteries didn't lose their incentive.
That is the cool news, and it has been seen by this administration, right? To my earlier comments, what is needed to supplement the grid as a whole to maximize efficiency and to do some other ancillary services that aren't as popular, but definitely there and available for developers and utilities to lean into to create other revenue streams using these things.
How are you seeing the storage plus solar industry address the felt need that projects might not pencil without the ITC support on the solar side? Like, how are projects being restructured? What are you hearing from your clients?
I'm hearing a little bit of hesitation for sure. If projects certainly don't meet some of these other provisions, start of construction or whatever else, you have other outside factors that could cause the project to need to delay a bit. We're seeing, of course, again, more larger scale load centers like data centers, looking at behind the meter type of applications or something a little bit more akin to that. But solar will survive regardless.
Yeah.
It will need some support, some optimization. This might not be the perfect season for it, but we'll wait a little bit. Come back around.
I mean, I was developing projects in Panama and Chile in 2014, 13 at grid parity, over a decade ago. It's inevitable that solar already has achieved, lowest cost electron around the world. So I agree with you that it's inevitable that solar will survive. I think that when, we're going through a phase right now, it's a forcing function of having become accustomed to the manna from the governmental heaven that was falling on the industry for the last decade. A lot of folks were fat, high on the hog.
Fat and happy, that's true.
I heard a lot of folks just in the conversations I've had over the last few days saying, I'm not gonna rock the boat right now. Like our customers are making a lot of money, and so we're not trying to force prices down. They're going to go down naturally in a few months anyway. On the other side of the coin, the utilities are also a big customer for anyone who is building, much more so than solar. Like utilities really do care about storage. They care about the flexibility, the reliability that it delivers for them. Can you talk about the way utilities view that storage asset from the lens of an EPC?
Yeah, absolutely. Again, keep using the word optimization. If you're going to make electrons, let's not spend them and waste them in the way of wasted heat or whatever else. Let's pump it away in a storage facility that allows the lessening of cycles on some of the other generating assets. And, it gives them the opportunity to move levers around both economically and practically with the physical generation piece of things. And honestly, I think there are probably use cases that haven't even been thought up yet just because they don't really have a good test bench facility to start tooling around with these types of things.
Yeah, totally. I was talking with a CEO. You said pumping, and it made me think of pumped hydro because it's not like we haven't sort of cracked the nut on having these sort of storage banks for a century. These folks were building a sort of hybrid version of a storage device, and they called it this sort of digital hydro plant, right? So they're moving weights and using gravity for batteries. But I thought it was really apropos that they were able to sort of tap into the understanding of their customer, the utility, who could just instantly grok this notion that it was akin to having a pumped hydro facility that you could put anywhere.
Yeah.
Without the environmental detriment,
Absolutely. I mean, we haven't talked about the various types of chem as well as technologies that can qualify as battery energy storage. That
sure.
Lithium is still
feel free to unpack that.
Well, I'd love to. There's just so much out there in development.
Yeah.
That, from the commercial side, something practical and deployable. We don't get to play around with that as much, but we come to these conferences, we ask the utilities what they're looking at. We even go as far as, visiting some universities that are playing around with different ideas. And we like to think that we're at the cutting edge of understanding what that next phase is going to be. But battery comes in a lot of forms, shapes, and sizes.
Yeah, storage definitely certainly does. What sort of non-lithium technology has caught your eye?
There's a lot that pencil out, but I think, for the sake of this question and this audience, lithium is still the mainstay and not really moving in terms of meeting that economic need for these projects to pencil out.
Are there any myths or misconceptions that you feel like routinely still come up that you thought had been put to bed?
In general, that, thermal runaways are going to happen on every single project, maybe. But no, I think the OEMs have been, very, very proactive in attacking some of those early on misconceptions and maybe some of the issues that we've seen in the last 3 or 4 years. So it's a very, very viable product that we're putting out there.
Yeah, and it's also not only for renewables. I feel like that's one of the things that we talked about earlier today in several other conversations is that there's a notion out there, and I've picked it up to just continue and perpetuate it now that I've got a megaphone. I can speak into about it. But this notion that we're moving from backup to backbone, right? And a lot of folks have batteries as this ancillary sort of backup power option that you can add on rather than starting from the perspective that battery is the asset. And there are going to be ways to power that battery. You can put it as simple as in your house, you have a battery that is itself an asset. And then all of a sudden you realize, wow, actually, if I could harness electrons from the sun, that'd be a cheaper way to fill my battery than pulling it in off the grid. Why don't I do that? Right?
The fuel costs infinitely cheaper for sure.
Indeed.
So.
When you're talking to buyers and policymakers, what language do you find actually lands with them and moves the conversation forward around batteries?
Well, I guess just the fact that it is still relatively new to a lot of developers, they're looking for some very baseline principle understandings of the risk profile and how we're going to mitigate that. Again, going back to what lithium is in this industry right now, it's kind of the mainstay for the vast majority of the utility scale projects that we're seeing. But how are we going to manage that seamless integration piece? Well, we do it in-house, working with our OEMs very closely. Not a lot of EPCs invest in a software team and things of that nature. We certainly have done that and have an army of folks that look for the gaps between the EMS, the BMS, the hardware itself, and essentially look to plug those gaps in or look for some overlap and get a deployable small sample size ready to go in a lab setting and test it out and make sure it works before we actually ever put a shovel in the ground, which is great. Cuts our commissioning time. So, as proactive as we can be as the constructors and designers and procurement, folks leading the way, we need to make sure that these are very viable projects and generating as quickly as possible the revenue, not necessarily the power, for the clients that choose us.
Yeah, I think that's really important, actually, is to focus on not necessarily the number of megawatts or megawatt hours, but the revenue that can be generated off of it. Along that line, a lot of folks' revenue has been directly attacked with OB3 stripping away all of the carrots and inserting all of the sticks. Yet, I've heard you say that it radically transformed, in fact, the TruGrid outlook on the market. Why is that so?
Well, I mean, tariffs, uncertainty in general, those are all things that you can kind of price into a project and you manage that. But it's the bigger gaps on who you can work with in general anymore. FIOC, unfortunately, has driven an incredibly large wedge between the U.S. and consumers in terms of being able to meet those demands we were talking about earlier. And whether it's, the battery side of things, the best side of things, or even, wind and solar, it's something that we're going to need to overcome really quick. And we try to stay on the front end to, again, advise our clients from a procurement standpoint on what side of the risk profile under those tariff and FIOC provisions a certain manufacturer might fall into. I don't think there really is a clean and clear just move with one OEM at the moment. Hopefully before the end of the year, we'll definitely get some more of those FIOC questions answered, and then we'll move into 26 with a brighter outlook.
So I'll give you a moment to talk a bit about perhaps how TruGrid differentiates the work that you do from others that might be vying for projects. If a developer comes to you needing to pull a project in to 12, 18, or 24 months from now, as opposed to longer time horizons that we had become accustomed to, what does it take to really deliver and give supply chain, given the existing bottlenecks, constraints, interconnection queues, et cetera, that we're facing?
That's a great question. I mean, we're still an EPC at the end of the day, and it's on us as a tier one EPC to be proactive in understanding, how to scale up labor, how to create more capacity in general, to be able to service our partners and make sure that, we're available to do, because we don't want to be the bottleneck. And again, it happens as such. We may, bring on a fair amount of projects and become the bottleneck, and we have to solve for that all of a sudden. But that's all separate from the procurement piece. Again, identifying the right strategy with what we're going to build, where we're going to build it. Certainly staying up front with quick response times, regarding design work, engineering work. It's a full suite of services and quite the orchestrated effort.
What does it look like at scale for standardizing around this product? It feels like, I mean, certainly it has felt for the last few years that every storage project was a snowflake.
Well, it is still very much that snowflake mentality. I mean, we're going to look at where we bring value based on our subject matter expertise.
Right.
It would be great, so great, as a large scale EPC to just make something cookie cutter and be able to produce time and time again. But you pay us for our ability to be proactive as well as reactive, and identify the times in which we need to accumulate one side versus the other.
So when you're working with owners who are logically trying to drive you down to the lowest possible cost, I imagine they're sort of focused sometimes on things that they're over-optimizing for one thing, under-optimizing for another. Where do you see owners overspending for battery projects and conversely under-investing in battery projects?
I see them overspending on that side of the risk profile where maybe a certain OEM meets or gets pretty close to a non-fiat concern type of approach, right? Again, we don't believe at TruGrid that there's an off-the-shelf, ready-to-go under current policy, something that just makes total sense. But folks are willing to pay to get rid of the risk. And that can look like a number of different things, especially coming through the EPC or whether the IPP or developer is going directly to those OEMs. But you pay for risk. That's the lesson in EPC.
Well, let's talk about lessons. You've done projects over 16 different countries around the world. You've done gigawatts scale of projects. What lessons from the international markets particularly are most relevant for the U.S. work that you're engaged in?
For the U.S. market, staying humble more than anything else. We are a very large country, very well established, and we're all blessed to be here and be able to turn the lights on and see the lights on when we need them. But where we don't need to be is become complacent on the fact that we are growing and continuing to grow. We certainly do not need to hinder ourselves from all power availability, which is kind of the feel of what we see right now. So staying diversified as a country in general, I think, is probably the biggest and broadest lesson we need to take away from the world.
Chris, what's the one thing that, as we wrap, you want utilities and developers to do differently coming away from this show next week, next month?
I'm not going to ask them to do something different this year. I'm going to say, stay true to your models. Stay true to the fact that as a developer and IPP, you've invested in this technology already, renewables specifically, as well as the energy storage side of things. Stay resilient, and let's hope that history does repeat itself. We talked about that in maybe more of a negative context earlier, but ITCs have gone away for wind and have come back time and time again. We see different administrations with much different perspectives, and sometimes have even been thrown off by an administration that we thought might be more conservative minded, that would bring ITCs back and things of that nature. So the need is there. That's prevalent. Let's be practical and let's understand that we are bringing solutions and keeping resilient, maintaining that grit.
Yeah, and I'll add that based on what I've learned from the conversation, it would be helpful for utilities to really treat the storage product as a reliability product with sustainable, measurable SLAs, and also help us pull interconnection planning forward.
There's that.
That is the critical. It is the critical path.
Yes.
Other than that, Chris, thank you so much for helping shed some light on what's happening on the construction side of these storage projects as we try to help our brothers on the solar side of the fence move their projects further, faster than we thought we'd have to. Chris Finley is the Chief Commercial Officer. I mistakenly said CEO earlier. Chief Commercial Officer of TruGrid, a EPC focused on storage plus solar here in the United States and abroad. Thanks for taking time to be here on Power Up Live.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Nico.